it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We talk running, fitness, mental health, and so many more topics. As the founder of a youth running program, I approach all of our conversations with our youth athletes in mind and kind of have a focus around those things. But as you will see, we are finding that all of these topics relate to runners and people who like to move and do fitness or anything like that. Relates to everybody. Check it out. Okay, so hi, it's Coach Tori. For people who had their podcast on automatic download, I apologize if you got this episode already this week and there was almost nothing on it. It was a whole mess. Recorded an entire episode. Somehow there was no audio for the entire audio files. As I was editing and finding out that that was the case, then the podcast uploaded. So apologies for all of you, any of you who got it that way, because I know I ended up getting it on my phone. So this is the correct episode. So sorry for that. Super bummer that I have to now re-record everything, but second time's the charm, right? So here we go. Coach Tori here, and we are talking about optimizing your running when running can't be your entire life. I'm sure a lot of you picture, like me, a dream world where you wake up after 9 hours and 10 minutes of sleep. The sun is up, the birds are chirping, the weather is no humidity, it's 47 degrees. You get to have your coffee, your pancakes, you get to go out on your nice long run. You come home, shower, stretch, foam roll, nap, go to your chiropractor, go do a strength session. I mean, right? Like we can picture what if running was all we did. You can picture what your days would look like. You also could probably imagine how unstoppable you can be as a runner. Because I know I also have those visions of like, if I eat, breathed, slept, running, and that was all it was, like I could be amazing. But I also live in the real world, and sometimes that is figuring out how to make things work. So slightly more realistic kind of day, you wake up, not enough sleep, it's raining, you didn't get to have the perfect breakfast, you now have to go to work or whatever you're doing for 8, 10, 12 hours, you come home, you maybe squeeze in a workout, you try to fit in dinner, right? So that's more of what our lives are actually looking like. How can we still be the great runner we want to be? And again, that's all defined by whatever you want that to mean. But how can we still be a runner when we can't make running everything that we're doing? So that is what we're going to talk about in this mini series. We're going to talk about some main elements to that. Of course, running, our strength training, our recovery, our sleep, our nutrition, our mindset, and all things kind of with that we can do to still be the great runners we want to be, but also still live in the lives that we have. The first place I want to start with our new mini series is running, of course, because that is everything pretty much that we are talking about. So just to recap, what I'm going to be talking about is how to be your best running self when your life doesn't really allow running to be your whole life. I'm going to break down some of these main elements. And the first one we're going to talk about is running. And this was kind of like a selfish topic because this has really been on my mind lately of how can I be the runner I want to be, but I also can't sacrifice everything in my life. Because I think I have two like conflicting ideologies in my head, right? I think if you dedicate your time and energy and focus to something, you can be unstoppable. There's really no limits. I've always kind of thought that anything I wanted to learn, anything I wanted to do, if I was taught it and someone showed me how to do it, or I was able to find out how to do it, I could do it. But then I also, on the flip side of that, or maybe not even the flip side, but there's a phrase that always bothered me, and people say it in a different kind of context, but if it's something you care about, you're going to make time for it. And I don't think that's actually always the case in real life, because I love running, but I actually can't always make time for it. I love sleep and I can't always make time for it. There's a lot of different things that because we have so much that we're doing. We just can't make time for the things that we want to do. And, that's just part of adjusting to the life that we live. So, with that, thinking about running, and currently I've been like off and on different kinds of running plans right now. The plan I'm trying to work with is really flexible of 3 or 4 running days a week. I have a long run that's kind of built into my work and parenting schedule. I have a track speed day that's built into my work and babysitting schedule. And then the other ones are kind of floaters in there. So I try to have an easy run day, which is usually something I can do. My son will take a stroller nap. We can fit that in. So that's a little flexible. I can either fit in another easy run day. I can maybe try to get another workout type day in. So I'm really trying to make something that's pretty flexible for me. I'm not sure necessarily that that's making me the best runner necessarily. But there's more, I think, work to do with that. I'm also trying to fit in strength training while I'm watching TV at night, or I try to fit in some stretching in the morning while my son is still waking up. So trying to fit in some different things to make it work. So that kind of now has me figuring out what is actually decided that it's good for all people. And I think depending on what you find on the internet, a lot of running coaches are going to say you need 4 different training workouts often, which is your long run day, your speed or interval day, a tempo type threshold day, and then an easy day. And there's other thoughts that you might want to do a bunch of easy days and 1 hard day. And then there's also run streaks, and there's different kinds of running ideologies that we're going to talk about later in this mini series, just because there's a lot of fun or interesting things that people subscribe to with running that I think are worth talking about. But today we are going to hear from some input, I would say from 2 experts, and really what they had to say about making running accessible and how to optimize your running for us busy people. And so they've given us a little bit to talk about. The 2 kinds of individuals that I asked them to really speak on is, and again, this was all kind of coming from how my life seems to shake out. And I think my life is not that different from a lot of other busy people. So sometimes I think my weeks are structured that I can only get 3, maybe 4 days that I can carve out some time to work out. And the other days it's just not happening, whether those days are just so busy, or I think that I can't work out these days because I think I have a different day to work out or something of that nature. So asking them, like, for the people who can't dedicate every day to working out or some kind of fitness thing, how can we make that work? And then the other idea was for people who only have short amounts of time to work out, it's like an hour or less, how can we make that work too? So let's hear from our experts. Okay, so the first expert that I got some answers from is U.S. track and field star and Olympian Colleen Quigley. So yeah, we're talking real experts here, right? Just for people who may not be familiar, but I imagine most runners are listening to this, you know who Colleen is. She was on the Team USA track and field team for the 3,000 meter steeplechase. She also competed in the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio. She ran the steeplechase as well as other middle distance events such as the mile. In 2019, she won first place at the USA Indoor Championships. So she knows her track. And again, fingers crossed, hopefully we can get her on later this year, sometime in the spring, just to do a whole interview on her, just because she is involved in so many great things, and also just love hearing from a highly competitive runner, right? So I have her answers here. And again, like just a reminder, I was asking about specific kinds of busy people. So people who only have a certain amount of days of the week to run, or people who have short time windows to run. So this is what she said. So first, she says, I feel like I understand this type of person because it's exactly what my fiance does. He works a ton and doesn't have much time to work out, but wants to maximize the time he does have. So like 3 to 4 times a week. So perfect. She already knows exactly the kind of person we are talking about. She says, I'll say this, if you run 3 times and do strength training once, then you'll be pretty set. So that fits right into our 3 or 4 times a week. I would mix up the run types so that you don't get bored because giving your body different stimuli is key. And so that goes back to what I had mentioned already about the 4 different, I mean, there's probably more run types and more specifics there, but those different kinds of run types. So those easy runs, those long runs, those speed runs, strength type running. And she'll get into different workout options there. But yeah, so trying not to just have every run you do. I go out, I run for 45 minutes at a comfortable pace, and then that's it. I'm sure that can work for some people. If your goal is just to be able to do that, then keep doing that. But we're talking about trying to like maximize your performance, improve your running. So you need to mix some things up a little bit. So 3 runs could look so different. She says, I would broadly suggest doing 1 easier endurance run, 1 speed workout, and 1 strength workout with longer intervals. So already I feel good about that because that's somewhat in line with what I have going on with my current running schedule, right? She talks about that easier endurance run, which I have built into my schedule, and the speed workout, which I have built into my schedule. And the strength workout with longer intervals, I definitely don't do often because I feel like that just doesn't fit necessarily. But if Colleen Quigley says that's important, I will probably make that more of a priority, right? So the easy endurance run should be at a fairly comfortable pace, one that you could run with a friend and talk a bit back and forth, pretty chill, she says. So I think a lot of us runners, if you haven't heard of conversational pace, what are you doing? Because I think all of us pretty much across the board use conversational pace to describe that easy, comfortable running. You're able to talk. You may be a little out of breath, but you're not gasping for air and only getting like 1-word responses out, right? It's easy. It should feel somewhat easy. It should feel like you can keep going for a while. Yeah, I mean, I think there's not too much else to say about comfortable pace. But yeah, our endurance runs, at least from my experience and understanding as a coach as well, they shouldn't be always feeling like I'm just making it to whatever mile I'm supposed to get to. Like you should feel like, oh, I could keep going if I had to. I might not want to, but I could still go because that's the effort that you're putting in. All right. The speed workout could be so many different things, but I would encourage people to not be afraid of working out on the track if it's available. If not, you can always do speed workouts based on time instead of distance. For example, you could do 200-meter reps at the track, or you could do a 40-second of hard running on a safe surface like a bike path. First of all, Colleen, you must think we all run 200 meters fast. Get out of here with your 40 seconds of hard running. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's a great point she brings up too, because also if we're talking about busy people, we may not always be talking about having access to a track. And even if you technically you have access to the track, being able to get in your car, drive whatever amount of time to get to the track, doing your workout, coming home, that whole thing. Like I know for me, I just started being able to have the ability to get to a track, actually do a track workout and come home. I had been doing my track type running workouts on my street because I have a pretty flat, not super busy road that I live on that I have distances measured out. But it's great that she points out too, like a safe surface, like a bike path. So especially if we're trying to run fast, you don't want to be running fast and catching a pothole. You don't want to be running fast and catching, grass, the edge of something. It's other things to trip on. Like that just leads to more injuries. And then also if we're worried about all that other stuff, or trying to make turns or trying to do this or that while we're running fast, your brain is doing different things than focusing on running fast correctly. So definitely love that she pointed that out. And yeah, there are so many workouts that it's not too complex to change the distance into a time interval instead. For people who are more experienced, you'll probably know what your time intervals roughly would be just from doing workouts consistently. And then you have to make sure you hold yourself accountable to, all right, if I run 4-minute kilometers on the track, I need to make sure I'm still running at that same effort so that my 4 minutes of running is about a kilometer, right? But you can always look up suggestions too if you have no idea, or you can go measure it out ahead of time, put your GPS, which I know the GPS watches and all those things are not always the most accurate, but you can always put those on and kind of get a rough idea of like, oh, to this stop sign, it's about 200 meters. So if I go up and back, I have my 400 meters measured out that way. So she gives us an example workout. It is 10 times 200 meters hard with a 200-meter walk or a light jog recovery. Love this because I personally love doing 200-meter repeats. I think they're super fun. You feel like you're going fast, but because the time is not super long, you get to go hard, recover, go hard again, recover. So it is a really fun workout to do. And also 200 meters is nice because it's not, if we're doing it at home, if we're doing it on our street, if we're doing it on a bike path, you don't have to do a super far distance. You have to figure out where you're going, right? So that's definitely a really accessible workout to do. Example 2 is 10 times 30-second hill sprints with a walk or a jog downhill. So this one's also maybe not super fun, but definitely something I do occasionally. Definitely used to do way more when I was more competitive with running. This is another great one that I think a lot of us can be able to do pretty easily. I know for me, there is like 3 different hills. If I'm, between 200 meters and 800 meters from my house, there's an abundance of hills to pick from that are probably about 30 seconds up. And that being said, if you have a giant hill by your house, don't be intimidated by that, because if you're going by this workout, you only have to go up the 30 seconds and then you can stop. You don't have to make it to the top and then you go back down to the bottom. For people who live in flat areas, I know this is often a topic I hear from people who live kind of in the middle of America, especially where things are a lot flatter. Where am I doing my hill sprints? I always say a bridge. I know that makes it a little harder because you may have to drive to somewhere or look for a bridge, but I don't know really any bridges that don't have some kind of hill. So using your bridge as your hill sprint is a great idea. I'm not a big fan of using like stadium stairs or anything like that, but that's just me personally. So yeah, those were 2 awesome speed workout suggestions from Colleen. For speed days, make sure you get a good warm up in and cool down properly to avoid injury. Yes. So that I think also is a great reminder for us busy folk, right? Because you want to just get in there, get your workout done, because you're like, I don't have time for all this, but the warm up is so, so important. Cool down is also really important. So I know for me, I set my timer of like how long I can be at the track for before I have to rush home, right? So my warm up is 10 minutes or less. I get to do a jog. I get to do some dynamic stretches. I get to do some running drills, maybe an acceleration or 2, some leg swings, and I'm good to go. And it usually doesn't even take 10 minutes, but I make sure I give myself that amount of time. So you can get a pretty good warm up in without having to spend 30 minutes or so doing a warm up. Cool down, same thing. I did my last track workout we did. It was like a 1-lap walk, cool down. I think I stretched a little bit when I got home later that night. So it doesn't have to be anything super fancy unless you obviously have some things that you need to work on that needs to be a little fancier, but it can be pretty simple. It doesn't have to be extremely time consuming. Another thing I do when I'm running at home, not when I'm like driving somewhere to go for a run, I might do my warm up while I'm either waiting for, if it's like our babysitter to come get my son, if I'm waiting for that or anything, I could be multitasking and trying to do a little bit of a warm up before I go out, just to also make sure I'm using the most of the time that I have. And then day 3, she says, would be longer intervals. So think like 7 out of 10 effort, but something you can hold for maybe 8 minutes at a time. So for me, this sounds something like mile repeats, maybe. So she continues on. It says, again, this could be on a track or just some timed on sidewalks or somewhere safe. Example, mile repeats at goal, half marathon pace, or do 7 out of 10 effort for 10 minutes at a time with a 2-minute walk or jog between reps. I love this suggestion because I think this is definitely something I neglect often. I think I already said that when she was explaining, what the 3 days of running could look like. But yeah, so mile repeats at goal half marathon pace. For me personally, that's concrete. That's going to help me understand how fast I should be running. I know some other people, like a 7 out of 10 effort makes more sense to them, and that they can go with that as well. So whatever of those two ideas on pacing works for you, go with that. Yeah, so do 8 minutes of running for people who are not on some kind of distanced out area, or do mile repeats. That 2-minute walk or jog recovery, I think is pretty standard for a lot of workouts we talk about too. So that's super nice. And she says you can do this with as much time as you have. So she didn't say how many reps you had to do. Definitely more than one to make it actually a couple reps. But yeah, it's not like you have to do 10, 12, whatever amount of reps and be out there for hours. So for me, I think all of these sounds like also could be done in about 60 minutes or less, depending obviously what you're training for. But those 10 times 200 meters with a 200-meter walk, you can definitely get that done. I say definitely, and then someone's going to be like, I actually can't. But I think there's a good chance you can get that done in 60 minutes or less. Same thing with the hill sprints. Depending on how many mile repeats you're doing, you can get a couple repeats in there before you hit 60 minutes. And your long run, if you're not training for super long distances, your long run doesn't have to be incredibly long. You could go out running for your hour, maybe hour plus. If you're structuring these 3 days of running, a lot of people I know pick weekends for their long run days because they often aren't going into work or something, but I know everyone's schedules are so different. So for people who do have a varied schedule, try to see if you have your one day off or whatever it is, or your day that you have 2 hours to yourself. Or I used to do my long runs at night on weekends, when baby's in bed, husband's playing Xbox. I have lots of time to myself so I can go out for my 2 hours or whatever it is, run. So really trying to be a little creative with that too. But yeah, so I think with these answers, she covers both categories of people, with that not as many days of working out, but also not excessive amounts of time of working out. And she had also mentioned having one day of strength in there, and doesn't really, I didn't get a chance to ask for elaboration on that at all, but making sure you add that strength in there, because that's so important to preventing injury. Because again, if we're busy, you do not have time to be hurt. You do not have time to maybe not be running, but you also probably don't have time to have to go to a bunch of different doctors to figure out how to heal yourself. So really prioritizing that as well to make sure that you don't have to run into an injury. So yeah, awesome that we got those answers from Colleen. Again, everybody keep your fingers crossed we can schedule to have her in the spring. Her Instagram is going to be linked in the show notes, just because you can keep up with her and see what she's up to. But she also offers a lot of great running and all those kinds of tips on her Instagram. So I recommend you definitely check that out. So the other expert we are hearing from today is Alan Ladd. If you do remember our episode, I think it was the running rules on fueling is maybe what it was called, but he talked all about fueling for different distances, and just like fueling as runners in general. It was super helpful, super informative. So I have a few answers from him. And again, I hope we get to have him back too, because he and I have been in discussions about other awesome topics that he can enlighten us about. But here were some of his tips overall for us busy runners. And just a reminder, Alan is a running coach in, I believe, the UK. He is a marathoner. I see all the time testimonials from his runners about how they have achieved their goals and then even, crush those to make new goals. And, just, it seems like his athletes are unstoppable with their goals. So he really does get us as runners and helping us achieve as much as we want to achieve. So let's start with so the first thing is, he says it's better to stay consistent on fewer days than to get overwhelmed trying to do more than you are comfortable with. And we will probably talk about this more later on in the series too. But That's also a great point. So of course, like I was putting parameters on like what busy people look like with like it's 3 days a week, it's 4 days a week, or it's this short time frame. But also it could be everyone's busy, could look completely different. So trying to find something that you're able to be consistent with is way better than trying to go too hard right away. And we know there's so many things that can happen if you do that, or thinking, I need to commit to these 4 days a week. I need to commit to this long run, but you actually are unable to do so because of your schedule or your life or whatever. So finding what you are actually able to do, finding those windows of time that you're able to work with, and then being consistent with that, because you are going to have more success if you find something you're able to actually work on, so that you can achieve something. And another great tip he has is tie workouts to something else that happens routinely to make it easier to stay on track. For instance, I run after dropping the kids at school. I know that's not possible for everyone, but it could be running first thing in the morning, running at lunchtime, or immediately after work. And for anybody who knows about like habit change and things like that, we talk about habit stacking, or even like way back in the day, we used to talk about pre-macking for non-preferred things. Not that running is non-preferred, but there's all these kinds of ideas of like you're pairing stuff together, right? So for this, if you are unsure when you have time to run, or you're not even sure when to try to fit running in, try to tie it to something as a good starter, right? So if it's when you're dropping kids off at school, if it is the first thing you do when you wake up, if it is for some people like after dinner before you're going to watch some TV to wind down or whatever it is, trying to tie it to something that you're already doing is going to make it easier to have it happen also, because you're already doing something, right? And you're able to find those times in there. If it's something like if it's while you're waiting for the bus or while you're doing something else. And I know he gets into this later too. So now I'm kind of getting my head of myself, but yes, tied to something that you're already going to be doing routinely too, right? It's not that I'm going to tie it to what is something that I do once a month or even less. I don't know, but you're not tying it to like every time you get your car oil changed, I'm going to go for a run, right? Because now you're only running once every 3 months, and that's probably not what we're talking about here, right? So you want it to be something you're doing every day or a couple times a week, so that it is something that's going to come up and be like, yes, okay, this is the time I need to go running. And then here's where he gets into looking for pockets of dead time, like during kids' sports clubs. If you are a parent and you're not involved, where you could do 30 to 60 minutes of running. And I have parents, and I've probably talked with them before, who come and they always, well, we have a couple parents who either always commit to walking during practice. And I have another parent who runs the entire hour-and-a-half practice. He cruises all around the very small park that we're at. I think the loop is definitely less than a mile, and he just runs and runs and runs, because that, I'm assuming, is the time that he can fit running into his schedule. So that's a great reminder too. And again, we're not just talking to busy parents, but just busy people in general. When I used to work overnight, I had a really hard time sleeping during the day, and I was always up way before my alarm would go off. And that was when I just was like, okay, I'm going to commit to running during these times, because it's time I should be sleeping or couldn't be sleeping, but I'm also not really doing anything else. So there's other times that we have these like weird dead hours in the day. I know people who work out on their lunch breaks. If you have a long enough lunch break and you're able to work out either at the gym at work or something like that. I run with someone who is a nurse occasionally, and she talked about how she's going to have to start running while she's, either between shifts or on her lunch break or some kind of break at work, because they have a gym, they have access to running. And that's when she has some time that's able to make it fit in. So that's another great point too, is we're not just stacking it with something we're already routinely doing, but you're looking for different time periods that you may not always think about. Because I think sometimes, especially if we're busy and we're trying to add more running in, we might get stressed about it and not just think like, oh, how easy would it be if I'm sitting at the park or I'm sitting at the sports field? I could just run around instead of scrolling on my phone or sitting in the car. Or, I mean, sometimes it might be nice to watch, but yeah, find those times that you actually are not doing something that you could be doing something. What you do at the time you have will depend on your health and fitness goals. The way I'm interpreting that, at least, is what we're actually able to do and what we're doing with that time is going to be what our goals are. So if we are spending time cycling, then probably are going to be gearing our goals towards cycling. If we are spending our time running, we should be gearing our goals towards running. If we're spending our time doing CrossFit, does that make sense? And I think that's kind of what he was getting at, is what we are spending time on is what our goals are going to look like. We can't have these goals that aren't actually related to what we are doing, because then you're just setting yourself up not just to not be able to achieve your goal, but also it's going to start to mess with you mentally as well. As like, I have this goal, I'm not able to achieve it, but you're also not doing the things you need to do. If you have a general health and fitness goal, then do some strength work, because we should all preserve muscle for longevity, and whatever method of cardio is easy for you and you enjoy. So yeah, so this doesn't totally speak to just like us talking about being like optimal runners, but busy people who want to stay fit. It's just a great reminder, and also a great reminder for runners is we need to do that strength work. We need to keep those muscles, especially as we are all getting older. But strength, and we're going to talk about strength a lot later, but that is like one of the biggest keys to staying injury free, which if you're busy, you don't have time to rehab an injury. So you got to do this stuff ahead of time. But yeah, strength plus cardio is going to make us fitter. So like he said, whatever your general goals are, you want to make sure you fit those things in, and we find time for that. And we will talk a little bit more about that as time goes on too. Okay, and this is kind of what I had said prior to one of the other things he had mentioned as a tip. But if you have specific running goals, then your training should be heavily skewed towards running, unless there's a reason you can't get out for a run, but could do something else instead, such as strength or like indoor bike. Yeah, so I mean, there's really no cheat to, like, if we want to be good at running, we need to be running. I know there, as runners, if we get hurt, we rehab on the bike or we do other things, and that is going to help us at some points. And there are going to be times where like you may bike a whole bunch and you get out there and you still can run. But if running is our goal, we need to be running, because I know my cardio for running can be amazing, but if you put me in a pool and ask me to swim a lap, I'm going to be gassed, just because it is different, right? We're moving muscles differently. So cardio is cardio, but also our muscles are going to be fatiguing differently with different exercises. So if we want to be running, we need to be running. And like you said, again, I love that Alan's very realistic with like, if you can't do it, there are other things you can do. So if you can't go out for a run because the roads are really icy for a week, maybe they don't plow your street, there's no way to get salt down, it just doesn't feel safe to run. Instead of being like, well, I can't run, maybe if you have a bike, jump on your bike. If you have a rower, jump on your rower. You got a jump rope, get out there and jump rope, just get something in. Strength work you can do in almost anywhere, depending on the equipment that you have. So that's the other thing is, if we have to adapt, we should, but don't always be adapting away from running, because then we may be adapting away from your running goals. Let's see. And training for up to 10K should be possible for most without going over an hour. For longer distances, you will benefit from longer runs in the week. Yeah, so we talked about this when we were looking at the suggestions Colleen gave us on the times of our runs. And I was saying that like a lot of these things could be done in probably 60 minutes or less, but your long run, you may want to look for that larger pocket of time, because even if you're running for an hour, you do have to get to your run, warm up, cool down, all that stuff. So yeah, so up to a 10K, which is like your 6-ish miles, right? You're probably able to train in about 60 minutes for that long run. You may want to go a little longer depending on your pace, all that stuff. But as you're training for longer distances, you will need to be training longer. There are some, I don't want to say cheats too, I feel like I've used that word a couple of times already. There are some workarounds when needed. So things like doing a speed day before your long run day. So now your long run's on fatigued legs, so you're getting a little bit of that stimulus of running longer because you're already running on tired muscles, or just back-to-back long runs. So there are ways, if you're unable to do, my heater just kicked on, so hopefully that's not too disruptive. It scared me. But this is like the third time I've had to re-record, so we're just going to keep cruising, right? So yes, there are ways to work around those things, especially for people who are training for really, really long distances, right? You're training for a 100-miler. A lot of us are not out there running 100-mile long runs a couple times to prepare, or even 90-mile. Like we're not doing the whole build up like you might see for like marathon training and things like that. So there are some things you can do to work around that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to do those long distances, you need to find time to do those long runs. And again, it could be once a week. So it doesn't have to be, you need those multiple long runs in the week. Mix up your training so it is varied in distance, intensity, and elevation, but ease slowly into these areas if you aren't used to it. Yeah, so to start, obviously, a lot of us who understand fitness, we talk about like varied stimulus. We need to be testing our muscles or confusing our muscles or all those things that people say all the time, right? But you gotta switch things up. I mean, you don't want to just train on, especially if you're running races that are different terrain than where you're training. You want to be able to accomplish different things in different places. So like you don't want to only train on flat if there might be some hills in your race, or only train on hills if you're running a lot of flat. So you want to have some varied skills there. And then also though, easing slowly into it. A lot of us who run also know the 10% increase in your mileage a week rule, which, you know, give or take could make sense. Sometimes may not make sense depending on the miles you're already running, but not jumping into something, not immediately running a bunch of hills, not immediately sprinting down hills to practice those things. So easing into those things, because like I said, we want to avoid injuries, because if we're busy, we don't have time to rehab injuries. We will get into injuries later on in the series as well. Love this one. Do not underestimate the power of easy running. Aim for the majority of your runs to be easy, as it will build your aerobic fitness and keep stress on the body down. It's also easier mentally to stick with something when the bulk of it is easy and enjoyable. Yeah, so I think easy running is having like a whole moment as of late. Everyone's really talking about you need to be running easy. You need to have all these easy runs. And I don't think we talked about that too much when we talked about Colleen's plan, but the running plan I have for our running group in my area, who's, well, again, a lot of recreational runners, but we are training for a race, right? It is a lot of easy days. There's not paces on it. A lot of it talks about like, make sure you pick somebody. We're doing conversational, having those easy runs, because we are just trying to build that base. We are trying to just be able to accomplish the distance we're running. So again, it depends on what your goal is. But yeah, you can go so far if we're doing just easy runs. You're able to get out there, you're able to run easy. I think for years and years, that's all I ever did. Once I stopped running for a team and I was just running by myself and had no understanding of training for anything, or I didn't even have any goals really. It just was like, I like running, I'm going to get out there. And it was just always go out there, run an easy 30 minutes, go out there, run an easy 45. And that was all I did. And I felt like I was very fit for a long time without really doing any speed work, any track work, any strength work. And I was never hurt. So there is something to be said for going out on those easy days, because then once you build up that base and you've had all those easy days of running, when you're doing those speed days, you are feeling fresh, you're able to run faster. So yeah, I mean, really all around, love having lots of easy runs. For anyone doing 3 days of running a week, I would suggest 2 easy days, potentially one that is longer and one that has with some strides at the end, and 1 workout day each, which could be an interval session, tempo run, or a hill workout. Yeah, so I think we talked a little bit about a structure of a plan that could look like this, right? You have your longer day, but your long run, again, doesn't have to be the most exhausting run ever, right? You are running longer, but you can still run long and run that easy pace and feel okay when you finish, right? So you have your long run, easy pace, you have your shorter, easy day, and then you're putting that workout in, whether that was your 200-meter repeats, your 30 seconds of hill sprints, your, 20 minutes of marathon pace, whatever it is, right? So you have that speed day too. So yeah, so that is super in my head again. And I like to think that I feel very busy, whether I am or not, but I feel busy. So 3 days a week, if I really commit to that, this past week, I will say I ran 0 days. But most weeks that is definitely doable to find that long run day, to find that easy day, and to find that speed day. Oh, and yes, let's not forget about strides. I don't even know if we've talked about strides yet. Oh, here, my heater is now going off again. I apologize if you hear that. Let's talk about strides. So we're looking at like again, 15, 20, 30 seconds. Some people like to measure out a distance, but you're really working on getting that speed up. You get to focus on your form. Again, for me personally, I don't have people do strides all out. I know some people who will say like, you finish your stride or your acceleration at your max speed. I say close to your max speed. But yeah, you're really just working on moving those feet, getting that form right, and then getting to feel fast, because it's also really fun to finish a workout and get to stretch those legs out and feel like you finished fast. Again, also, it's probably when I was doing all these easy runs, I would almost always finish with a sprint because it just was so fun to finish that way, right? Let's see. Oh, here, and he talks about strides. Strides are useful because they give you a little bit of speed work and get you focused on form without the easy run turning into a workout and fatiguing you too much. Yeah, so that's the other thing, and the great thing about strides. So again, I kind of touched on some of the things that he was saying, and I'm sure that may just be in my subconscious from reading this email already. But yeah, you get to work on form, you get to work on speed, but it isn't your speed day. You're not leaving feeling like, wow, I'm wiped. I just crushed it on the track, right? And you're not waking up the next day being like, oh, I'm a little sore, a little stiff, a little tired. Any of those things, you're usually going to feel completely fine. And the way that we often do strides with, especially our youth runners, is you are doing your stride the distance, you're walking all the way back, so you are fully recovered before doing it again, because it is a different thing than if we're doing our intervals and you have a specific kind of rest where you are supposed to start when you're a little more tired, right? So strides are really just supposed to be focused on the fun, fast form, ooh, like that, and getting to have that break at the end. And then he touches on strength is important, but if running is your main focus, then using one of only 3 days available for strength is a big loss for your running. Instead, try to fit strength around other activities. Even 5 minutes a day of bodyweight exercises as you're waiting for the kettle to boil could be beneficial. That gives you 30 plus minutes of strength a week without adding another session or compromising an existing one. Yeah, so I'm glad he pointed this out too, because I really wasn't even thinking about that. I just keep thinking like, oh yeah, we have to have strength as well. And then now our 3 days of running a week, if that's what we're able to manage, now turns into 4 or 5. And now that's not really what we were talking about with being so busy. And I love that he said this, because this is how I often am doing my strength right now, is if it's while we're watching TV, I might get down and do some squats, push-ups, sit-ups. If I am cooking in the kitchen, maybe doing some lunges or whatever, just to get some movement in there, get some strength in while I am waiting for other things to happen, because it really does add up. And I know it definitely doesn't feel the same as if I went out into my gym and put the weights on the barbell and, did a whole planned out workout. It's definitely not going to feel the same as that, but you are still getting that strength in. Your body's still getting to move in different directions, different planes. Your muscles are working a different way. So you are still getting those benefits that we need for running to help us with like that injury prevention, but also just make us a stronger runner too. So I'm glad he pointed that out. Yeah, so awesome tips from Alan. Again, super realistic. And I think that's the way it seems like he coaches. He is still a runner. He knows how to go from being, middle of the pack to a better runner. We have also talked about like aging as runners. So again, things that he and I are hopefully going to get to talk about on the podcast in the future. But yeah, I love these realistic tips. I at least feel seen by a lot of these things. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. Or, oh, I'm already doing that. So really great to have these tips from Alan. I just want to thank Alan and Colleen for giving us some answers today to start off our mini series on optimizing our running as busy people. I'm sure at some point I will have like a cutesy name that I will remember for, kind of the whole idea of the series. But yeah, that's really what we're talking about. And again, it's definitely really focused on me because I'm feeling really busy, but I'm also feeling like I really want to be a great runner. So I'm super excited to be able to dive into all of these tips, talk to all these experts. And this was just the beginning of our running part. And again, we're going to probably jump around a little bit just because of people's availability and when I'm able to record and things like that. So we may be talking about running this week. Next week, we may talk about sleep. Maybe we'll come back to running. So we'll be a little all over the place, but hopefully it all kind of ties together and you're at least feeling like you're getting useful tips to be a busy runner. So actually next week, I'm super excited. We're going to have an author of a new book. She's also a marathoner, run coach. super excited to hear from her. And she also, like, her big thing is working with people like all of us. So can't wait to pick her brain for lots of tips and talk to her about her book. And then we will probably transition into sleep. And I do want to get back to talking about running. I want to talk about different common running plans, also talk about maybe running fads. I'm not even sure if that's the right word, but talking about running streaks, talking about different kinds of like running training that people are really into, and different things like that. And then we will get into injury prevention. Yeah, we got a lot of cool people on. We're trying to schedule right now. So really excited to get to talk to all of them. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode and feel like you got at least some useful tips. Again, links will be in the show notes. And sorry for any discombobulation. It was like a nightmare and a half to have to re-record this and then re-record again. And then, just so many things were going on, hence feeling too busy, right? But yeah, so excited. Can't wait to talk more about running and all the other things. And hopefully I can give some updates on how these tips are helping me with my running. Right now, we are still in the middle of a winter 5K series. Maybe have a 15K coming up in spring, toying with an ultra in the fall, but maybe there will be something else fun in the middle. So I will keep everybody updated just because I think it's always fun to chat about everybody's progress. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all the things that you can do for a podcast that you enjoy listening to. Make sure you check out social media, our website, any of those things. If you have questions, comments, interview requests, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.